On the eve of the Second World War, the aviation forces of the Soviet Union faced a serious challenge. Nations preparing for conflict already had in their arsenals heavy fighters, aircraft capable of performing a wide range of missions, from engaging enemy bombers to destroying tanks and conducting reconnaissance. These machines were the forerunners of modern multi-role aircraft, combining speed, maneuverability, powerful armament, and protection. The USSR lacked such an aircraft, and this gap could prove costly in the looming war. The military leadership understood a machine was needed that could simultaneously serve as a ground attack aircraft, tank destroyer, night fighter, bomber escort, and long-range reconnaissance plane. This very need became the driving force behind the creation of an aircraft that would change the approach to aerial combat. In 1938, Vsevolod Tairov, an experienced aircraft designer and student of the renowned Nikolai Polikarpov, took charge of the experimental design department at Plant No. 43 in Kyiv. He proposed the idea of creating a single-seat, twin-engine armored fighter that would combine high speed, maneuverability, and powerful weaponry. Tairov envisioned his machine as a universal tool capable of effectively engaging both enemy aircraft and armored vehicles. His concept involved using two engines, allowing the aircraft to maintain speed without compromising on protection or firepower. The twin-engine configuration made it possible to install heavy armament and reliable armor while preserving flight performance. Single-engine fighters often sacrificed armor for speed, whereas the proposed design eliminated this dilemma. The Red Army Air Force and the People's Commissariat of the aviation industry saw potential in his proposal for creating an aircraft that could fill the gaps in the USSR's aerial arsenal. At the end of October 1938, Resolution No. 256 of the Council of People's Commissars and the Central Committee of the Party officially tasked Tairov with developing a single-seat twin-engine fighter designated OK-06. The aircraft's main mission was defined as combating enemy aircraft and tanks. The requirements formulated in December 1938 by aviation theorist Sharov were exceptionally demanding. The maximum speed had to reach 650-700 kilometers per hour, landing speed exceed 120 kilometers per hour, service ceiling be 12,000 to 13,000 meters, and time to climb to 8,000 meters only 6 minutes. Takeoff run was to be no more than 100 meters, landing roll up to 200 meters, and a turn at an altitude of 1,000 meters had to be performed in 16 seconds. Tairov understood the complexity of the task, but his team was ready to take it on, relying on state support and their own enthusiasm. The OK-06 project was given high priority. To support its implementation, an additional 70 engineers were assigned to Kyiv Plant No. 43, although most of the staff were young graduates from the Novocherkassk Aviation Institute. Despite their lack of experience, Tairov's team set out to create the aircraft from scratch. They had to develop the design and meet tight deadlines. The first prototype was to be ready by October 1939, and the second by December of the same year. The entire process from initial sketches to flight testing was to take less than 12 months. Such a schedule demanded maximum concentration of effort and resources, but Tairov was convinced that his idea was worth it. Tairov chose a twin-engine configuration with M88 air-cooled engines, delivering a total output of 2,000 horsepower at an altitude of 7,000 meters. The aircraft was designed to be compact. Its length, wing area, and wingspan were comparable to the British single-engine Hurricane fighter, and smaller than the American P-47 Thunderbolt. The compact dimensions ensured a minimal fuselage cross-section and streamlined contours necessary for achieving high speeds. Special attention was given to the fuselage structure, which consisted of 3 sections. The forward part included the pilot's cockpit and the armament bay. The side walls of the cockpit were made from duralumin sheets, 12 millimeters thick. An 8 millimeter armor plate was mounted at the front, and behind the pilot's head and back were plates 13 millimeters thick. The cockpit floor was lined with a 5mm steel sheet, and in front of the pilot was an armored glass panel 45mm thick. The cockpit canopy slid back, providing easy access to the pilot's seat. The central fuselage section was connected to the center wing section, center section of the wing, to which the forward and tail sections were bolted. The tail section was a wooden monocoque, reducing the overall structural weight. The center wing section and wing panels had a twin spar construction with flanges made from chromancel steel and duralumin webs. The skin was made from duralumin, while the engine nacelles were made from electron, a magnesium alloy. The wing used the RAF-34 airfoil profile and Fries-type ailerons and Schrenk-type flaps, 2 in the center section and 1 on each outer wing panel, were operated by a pneumatic system. The horizontal stabilizer was made from duralumin, the fin and aileron frames from electron, while the rudder and ailerons were fabric-covered. To counteract the propeller torque that could destabilize the short-wing aircraft, the M88 engines were equipped with counter-rotating propellers. The engine nacelles had adjustable cowling skirts, giving them a teardrop shape to improve aerodynamics, although the propeller spinners appeared disproportionately large. In the center wing section were 2 fuel tanks of 365 liters each, and in the fuselage an additional 467-liter tank, providing sufficient flight range. The landing gear had a tricycle configuration with a tailwheel. The main gear retracted into the engine nacelles, while the tailwheel retracted into the fuselage via a pneumatic system. The main gear had a considerable forward offset to ensure a safe tipping angle. Manufacture of the aircraft was carried out using the jig and template method, speeding up the production process. Armament consisted of 4 20mm Shovaiki cannons with a total ammunition load of 800 rounds, mounted in the nose for high-firing accuracy. The OK-06 mock-up was presented on January 3, 1939, but required refinements. After modifications, it was shown again on February 16th, and on March 9, 1939, it was approved. The resolution of the Defense Committee under the Council of People's Commissars, dated July 29, 1939, officially ordered Tairov and Plant No. 43 Director Smirnov to complete construction of the first prototype by October and the second by December of that year. Despite the tight schedule, the first OK-06 was ready on December 8, 1939. Factory testing began on December 31st at the Central Aerohydrodynamic Institute, and the first flight took place on January 21, 1940. This stage marked an important step in realizing Tairov's ambitious idea, but serious trials lay ahead to determine whether the aircraft could meet the high expectations. After ground trials, the aircraft took to the air on January 21, 1940, and by June 8th of that year, the first stage of testing had been completed. With a takeoff weight of 5,250 kilograms, the OK-06 demonstrated impressive flight characteristics. Maximum speed at sea level reached 488 kilometers per hour, and at an altitude of 7,550 meters, 567.5 kilometers per hour. Rate of climb remained high. The aircraft reached 5,000 meters in 5.5 minutes. Service ceiling was 1,100 meters, and cruising range reached 700 kilometers. Takeoff run measured 369 meters, 14.8 seconds, while landing roll was 466 meters, 20.5 seconds. Time to complete a turn at 1,000 meters altitude was 20.7 seconds, somewhat exceeding the technical requirement of 16 seconds, yet still acceptable for a heavy fighter. The landing speed of 150 kilometers per hour was considered rather high, which could complicate operation from unprepared airfields. The OK-06's armament consisted of 4 20mm Shovaiki cannons with a total ammunition load of 800 rounds. The design of the nose section allowed the gun layout to be modified flexibly without major redesigns, which was a significant advantage. The M88 air-cooled engines proved more survivable in combat than liquid-cooled types, adding to the machine's reliability. However, testing also revealed shortcomings. The aircraft suffered from insufficient longitudinal and directional stability, especially during climb and turns. During takeoff and landing roll, there was a tendency to yaw, caused by the lack of airflow over the vertical stabilizer. Pilots complained of excessive control forces, making the aircraft difficult to handle. These problems were partly explained by design miscalculations in the tail section, which was wooden and insufficiently rigid. In addition, the non-geared M88 engines operated unstably, creating further complications. Despite these drawbacks, the aircraft's performance was considered promising. And People's Commissar of Defense Voroshilov raised the question of producing a small batch to gain manufacturing experience and introduce the aircraft into frontline units. It was planned that by the end of 1940, Plant Number 43 would produce 10 aircraft, increasing output to 150 in 1941. Designers were tasked with eliminating the identified deficiencies and developing a modification with geared M88R engines. However, problems with the engines were compounded by the arrest of leading engineers, slowing refinement of the power plant. This forced a postponement of the small batch plans until state trials were completed. In June 1940, at a joint meeting of the People's Commissariat of the Aviation Industry, NKAP, and the Directorate of the Red Army Air Force, it was decided that Plant Number 43 would become the main production base for the OK-06, with preparations for serial manufacture to be completed by year's end. Tairov was also instructed to present a modernized OK-06 with geared engines by August 1, 1940. From June 9 to August 23, 1940, Plant Number 81 carried out improvements on the first prototype. The main changes affected the tail section, the fuselage was lengthened, and the single-fin vertical stabilizer was replaced with a twin-fin arrangement to improve longitudinal and directional stability. After these modifications, the aircraft was returned to TSAGI for retesting. At the same time, work was nearing completion on the second prototype, the OK-06 buys, which in December 1940 received the designation TA-1. Construction was completed on September 11, 1940, and on October 1st, the aircraft arrived at TSAGI's 8th Department for factory trials. The first flight of the OK-06Bs took place on October 31, 1940, with test pilot Yemelyanov at the controls. The aircraft was equipped with geared M88R engines of the same rotation, differing from the first prototype's non-geared M88s. Two 7.62mm HKS machine guns with a total of 800 rounds were added in the nose, and a bomb rack was mounted under the center wing section. Wing sweep was altered and the aileron balancing and control linkages were improved, positively affecting in-flight handling. Testing of the OK-06Bs continued until January 14, 1941, encompassing 45 flights. The aircraft showed good stability along all three axes, was steady in turns and easy to land. Maximum speed at sea level was 470 km per hour at 7,050 meters, 595 km per hour, while landing speed was reduced to 135 km per hour compared to 150 in the first prototype. The aircraft could sustain flight on a single engine. On January 14, 1941, during a demonstration flight outside the program, an accident occurred. The right engine failed due to a connecting rod failure in the front cylinder bank, likely caused by a malfunction of the R2 propeller governor. Test pilot Yemelyanov was forced to land in a forest, which destroyed the aircraft. Lead engineer Yeligin received a reprimand for organizing an unauthorized flight. Despite the accident, the test report completed on January 31, 1941, confirmed the aircraft's high performance. Service ceiling of 10,000 meters, time to climb to 5,000 meters, 6.3 minutes to 8,000 meters, 11.6 minutes takeoff run, 324 meters landing roll, 406 meters, and cruising range 1,200 kilometers. The crash did not halt work on the project. In February 1941, by order of People's Commissar of the Aviation Industry Shakurin, Plant Number 43 was reorganized, with the creation of a new Plant Number 483 as the main base for further refinement of the aircraft. Tairov was tasked with converting the first OK-06 prototype into a new variant, the TA-3, with more powerful geared M89 engines. A resolution of the Council of People's Commissars dated January 25, 1941, required completion of the conversion by May 1st of that year. On the TA-3, wing sweep was reduced, the area of the vertical stabilizers was increased, and the landing gear doors were redesigned so that in the retracted position the wheels protruded slightly for safety. Armament was strengthened. In addition to 4 20mm Schwach cannons, 2 7.62mm SKS machine guns were added, or, alternatively, 4 12.7mm Taubin machine guns. For the anti-tank variant, provision was made for 1 37mm SHFK-37 cannon, 2 23mm MP6 cannons, and 2 SKS machine guns. Testing of the TA-3 was conducted at the Flight Research Institute from May 12 to July 10, 1941. The aircraft achieved a maximum speed of 580 kilometers per hour at 7,100 meters, a range of 1,060 kilometers at 0.76 of maximum speed, a service ceiling of 10,000 meters, and a landing speed of 143.8 kilometers per hour. In dives, speeds of 630 kilometers per hour were reached. 5 test pilots, UNK Stankovic, NV Gavrilov, VN Grinchik, GM Shiyanov, and AB Yumashev, praised the TA-3's handling qualities. The aircraft was stable at all center of gravity positions, had no tendency to drop a wing at stall, and when losing speed, it smoothly lowered its nose. Visibility from the cockpit was good forward and upward, but unsatisfactory to the sides and downward. Armament and landing gear operated reliably, and the M89 engines provided adequate cooling in all operating modes. Tairov strongly advocated for launching the TA-3 into series production. On July 28, 1941, he sent a memorandum to People's Commissar of the Aviation Industry Shakurin, emphasizing that all documentation was ready for transfer to the serial plant, and noting the possibility of quickly replacing the 4 Shveki cannons with the recommended armament configuration already prepared by the Design Bureau of Plant No. 487. The designer also pointed out that installing M82 engines instead of M89s could increase maximum speed by 12-15 kilometers per hour, while replacing the wing panels to increase range would simplify operation even of completed aircraft. Tairov proposed using Plant No. 127 in Ulyanovsk as the production base, and to accelerate the process, transferring the evacuated Plant No. 483 from Kuybyshev there. He stressed the relevance of the TA-3 in wartime conditions and requested urgent instructions to start production. Support from the Air Force was tangible. Back in January 1941, after the OK-06B's accident, Tairov had appealed to V.M. Molotov, emphasizing the aircraft's advantages over single and twin-engine fighters in flight performance and armament. He proposed building a small batch of 15-20 aircraft for state and military trials. The response was swift. A resolution of the Council of People's Commissars, SNK, in the All-Union Communist Party, VKP, dated January 25, 1941, instructed Tairov to create 2 TA-3 variants, with M89 engines by May 1st and with M90 engines by October 1, 1941. Additional enterprises were involved in implementation: Engine Plant No. 29, Armament Plant No. 32, and Propeller Manufacturing Complex No. 150. Numerous technical issues slowed progress. The main obstacle remained the instability of the M89 engines, which, despite higher output from 300 horsepower at takeoff, consumed excessive amounts of fuel. To achieve the required range, an additional 450-liter fuselage tank was installed, increasing takeoff weight to 6,050 kilograms, almost a ton more than the OK-06. This resulted in degraded speed characteristics. Maximum speed was 580 kilometers per hour at 7,100 meters altitude, inferior to earlier prototypes. The most tragic blow to the project came with the death of Vsevolod Tairov on October 29, 1941, in an aircraft crash during a flight to Kuybyshev in the Penza region. The death of the chief designer sharply slowed work on the TA-3. Without his leadership and persistence, the pace of development dropped significantly. The outbreak of war added new difficulties. Factories were overloaded with the production of already adopted aircraft such as Yaks, MiGs, and Il-2s, while evacuation of industry to the rear disrupted logistics. These factors made starting series production of the TA-3 practically impossible, despite its clear potential and support from the military. The TA-3 had considerable potential that went unrealized. The design allowed for flexible adaptation of armament and installation of more powerful engines such as the M90, M120, or high-altitude AM-37. There was even a preliminary design with pusher propellers to improve aerodynamics. In 1940, Tairov developed the OK-07 project with AM-37 or M90 engines featuring a wooden delta-wood fuselage, an improved canopy with armored glass, and an in-flight adjustable stabilizer. The aircraft was intended as an interceptor fighter, escort plane, ground attack aircraft, and light bomber. The Air Force approved the preliminary design on December 9, 1940, noting its high survivability with M90 engines. The 1940-1941 experimental aircraft construction plan also included the twin-engine OK-08 fighter with AM-36 engines, later replaced with M90s due to the former's unavailability. The TA-3 could have become a universal combat aircraft. With its standard armament of 4 20mm Schwack cannons, the aircraft could effectively destroy unarmored and lightly armored targets. Armored personnel carriers, with a probability of 0.8 to 0.85, airfield-based aircraft such as the Shi-111, 0.94 to 0.96 locomotives, 0.9 to 0.95. This effectiveness made the TA-3 a potential scourge of light tanks and self-propelled guns, of which the German forces at the start of the war had 1,698 out of 3,350 total armored vehicles. The aircraft could have complemented the Il-2 ground attack plane, performing missions as a night fighter, convoy escort in naval aviation, air defense suppression, and reconnaissance. Despite its promise, the TA-3 never entered series production. The evacuation of factories and the collapse of supply chains hindered progress, and the closure of OKB-483 at the end of 1942 put an end to the project's history. A comparison with Polikarpov's I-180, which also failed to reach production due to engine problems and organizational difficulties, highlights a systemic problem in Soviet aircraft development of the time. The arrest of engineers and the pathological enforcement of duties by the NKVD paralyzed the development of air-cooled engines, which became a key obstacle for the TA-3. Today, the name Ta-3 is little known even among aviation enthusiasts, while Yaks, MiGs, and Ils became symbols of Soviet aviation in the Great Patriotic War. Tairov's aircraft remained in the shadows. This historical injustice is linked to the objective hardships of wartime and the loss of the chief designer, whose energy and vision might have brought the project to success. The Ta-3 had every chance to become a powerful tool in the fight against enemy aircraft and armored vehicles, yet it remained only a page in the history of aircraft construction. Telling its story pays tribute to the efforts of Tairov and his team, who created a machine capable of influencing the course of the war despite all obstacles.